Yep.
Representative, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it. I want to know, I know you started your political career in local politics in
Mm-hmm.
West Springfield. Can you talk to me about what sparked your interest in public service?
Yeah, so I kind of got involved in politics in a non-traditional way. You know, a friend of mine, I had always been involved in helping in other campaigns. And so a friend of mine reached out to me and said, you know, Mike, you've been involved. Why don't you consider running for the District 3 City Council seat? And at the time, I was really, you know, personally terrified. I said, I don't know if I want to put myself up on the pedestal to be, you know, judged. And so I did at the end of the day. And then once I got into the city council politics and realized, you know, more in depth what government service is really all about and helping people, I found that it was something I really loved. And then when the opportunity to run for state representative happened back in 2011, you know, I jumped at it.
That's awesome. So I had a hard time finding the bills that you filed this session. Can you
Mhm.
talk to me about something that you're advocating for
Yeah.
and really what you're most passionate about this session?
Yeah, so I have two primary pieces of legislation that I'm currently working on. One of them is a consumer protection piece that addresses auto insurance. And so what it does is auto insurers use your driving history as a credit rating criteria. And then what happens is on the direct insurers, like if you go to a popular website, they ask you to self-disclose what your driver history is. And if you've forgotten to mention a speeding ticket or an accident that happened many years ago, what happens is after they bind you into the policy, they then come back and say your premium's going to double and sometimes even triple. And so from my point of view, I think that that's wrong. And so we filed legislation that would make it so that these direct insurers and others would have to, you know, if they use driver history as a credit rating criteria, they have to check it up front and notify you if there's any potential changes to come from what you've disclosed. And I think that that bill will be getting released from the Financial Services Committee shortly. It is the second time that I've had to file the bill, but I think there's some traction and we have an agreement with all of the interested parties, the direct insurers and local agents. And so I think that that's something that will hopefully get passed into law this session. And then the other piece of legislation that I have that I think is you know, important and good for the Commonwealth in general is a bill I filed with the Greater Springfield Visitors and Convention Bureau. And what it seeks to do is create a new funding model for regional tourist councils to be able to, you know, market our area, Western Mass, let's say, in different parts of the country, so that we can bring in, you know, different, you know, like conferences or venues or things of that nature. And you know, when those people come to Western Mass, they spend their dollars in our restaurants. They, you know, they rent our hotel rooms, and it just helps the local economy in many different ways. And again, this is the second year that I had to file this bill, but we're now seeing, you know, the greater Boston area is now signing on. Worcester, the Berkshires, all these different areas have bought into this plan, and I think that we have enough traction to also see something along those lines be successful.
That's great. And I want to go back to your the bill you filed regarding auto insurance.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to get your thoughts just about the auto industry as a whole. I'm sure you're aware of the right to repair law.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me about how you feel about, you know, the legislation right now, whether it's distracted driving or auto insurance?
Yeah.
What can the state do to better protect drivers in Massachusetts?
Yeah, so when it comes to the right repair law, like I side on the side of the consumer. I think that people should be able to access that information. I understand the proprietary nature and the, you know, the investment that these companies have made, but once a consumer buys the product, I think that they should be able to choose who they, you know, whether they want to repair something or, you know, who they want to go to. And it's interesting, there's a couple different parts of that bill that are that aren't right, you know, on the surface. They're kind of buried within, and that's more of commercial parts, and so big truck repairs and things like that. And I have a constituent that owns a business who repairs these larger vehicles, and so if they are not able to get the diagnostic information, there's a real financial burden for them to say to a client, hey, I think it's part of your transmission, and that part is going to be about $4,000. Do you want me to fix it? And you know, not really even knowing if that's, you know, not being able to diagnose it. And so there's a few different reasons that I think that we should be doing the right to repair.
Great. I want to segue a little bit as chair of the Committee on Global Warming and
Mm-hmm.
Climate Change. How do you feel about the governor's climate change adaptation plan? I know it wasn't heard by your committee, but I just think it would be interesting to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so when it comes to that, I think, so a couple different thoughts when it comes to it. I think the governor's bill is a giant step in the right direction. And by that, I mean, like the governor's looking to do something. Now, having said that, Speaker DeLeo has also passed or asked to have a bill heard, and we've done it in the House, which is a bond bill which would help communities' resiliency and adaptation for global warming and climate change initiatives. And the local communities would get to decide. So I think that there are competing but not competing interests moving forward in this space, and I think that they're both very good ideas that have a lot of merit. Now, I also don't think that each bill independently is the best and only way to do it. And so I think that, having these greater conversations, the hearings on the governor's bill, the meetings on the speaker's bill, those are all really important. And I think that they'll lead to positive changes for the Commonwealth. Unrelated to those specific bills that I think is important to, have a discussion is there's currently an idea, no legislation yet, but there's a lot of discussion within the administration and this committee about whether or not the Commonwealth should have a state climatologist. It's something that was X'd out of the budget a few years back. Now, at the time when the state climatologist was removed from the budget, there wasn't this, urgency of climate change that there is now. And so the proposals that exist would be to make a new Office of State Climatology, the state climatologist, have a background of more scientific and advisory rather than just someone that's sitting in an office and doing a lot of research. And what it would do, the different proposals that exist, would be to harness a lot of the educational resources like the UMass Bostons or the UMass Amhersts or MITs of the world and bring those folks together and try to come up with what are best practices, what are the realities of climate change as we sit here today, and what are they moving into the future. And I think that that's something that could be very positive as well.
Do you think any of those bills will pass? Probably not in totality, but do you think there will be some version of them that emerge together?
I do, and mostly because so this goes into the science a little bit, but geographically, the city of Boston and the coast of Massachusetts, by all predictions that I've heard from most of the reigning scientific people that know the most about this subject, Massachusetts and Boston in particular happen to be in the real epicenter of climate change. And so rising sea levels, the financial impacts to the city of Boston, the coastline up and down, going down the coast towards the Cape, there's some real significant financial impacts that exist if they come to fruition. And so I think that you'll see agreements starting to bubble to the surface where everybody's saying, okay, this is definitely something we need to address.
Absolutely. I want to ask a little bit of a different question. I know the House is about to vote on an education funding bill.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the versions that are...
Right, so I think it's a great question, and the reason why I say that to you is, this bill, it doesn't seek to address all of the needs of the education world, right? So what we're really talking about is what are the impacts to, how are we going to implement the findings from the Foundation Budget Review Commission? And so this particular piece that we're doing today, even though it's very big, it's really a central focus is about how do we direct resources to the districts that need it the most, and how do we level the playing field so that every child in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has an ability to succeed. And so I think that the bill as it's written is very good, the House version, and I think that the version that was also passed in the Senate is also very good. And I am really looking forward to them coming and having an agreement, on the conference committee and come up with a final bill that gets approved by both branches. And I think at the end of the day, all 351 cities and towns in the state will immediately benefit.
Great. Last question for you.
Yeah.
I know you're making the trip from West Springfield to the Statehouse pretty often. How can your constituents stay in contact with you and find out, really the bills that you filed and your voting record?
There's a lot of ways, right? And so I have Facebook accounts for the state rep, Michael J. Finn, state representative. We have Twitter. We have an office, a district office that's open, regular business hours in West Springfield at 71 Park Ave. My number has been and always will be easily accessible via the internet. And so, and we also do regular office hours at the West Springfield Senior Center and the Chicopee Public Library. And so we do our best to make sure that people know that we're around and accessible. And so any one of those avenues they can use to get in touch with us.